Whisper of the Doll Episode 5, The Unseen Connection. Rika sat in the cold basement, surrounded by shattered glass and the eerie silence that followed the destruction of the mirror. Her breathing was ragged, and her heart still raced from the terror she had just faced. The doll lay motionless at her feet, its once glowing eyes now dark and empty. For a brief moment, relief washed over her. She had stopped whatever dark force had been controlling it. But then, the weight of the situation began to settle. Elena was gone, and the air felt unnervingly still. Rika's mind raced, trying to process everything. The mirror was destroyed, but where had Elena gone? And was the nightmare truly over? "Elena?" she whispered, her voice trembling. There was no response, only the echo of her own voice bouncing off the cold stone walls. Suddenly, she realized that she was alone. The realization made her chest tighten with anxiety. Had she truly freed Elena from her prison, or had the destruction of the mirror trapped the girl somewhere else? The thought gnawed at her as she shakily stood up, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of the girl. She looked down at the lifeless doll once more. It no longer seemed threatening, but its presence still made her uneasy. Gritting her teeth, Rika kicked the doll aside, feeling a rush of anger and fear rise up in her. How had such an innocent-looking object caused so much suffering? As she gathered her thoughts, Rika decided that she needed to leave the mansion. The place felt cursed, filled with too many dark memories and strange occurrences. She needed answers, but more importantly, she needed distance from the horrors she had just endured. With shaky steps, she made her way out of the basement and up through the dilapidated mansion. The old floorboards creaked under her weight, and the eerie stillness of the house made every sound feel amplified. The once majestic structure now felt more like a tomb, holding secrets that she was no longer eager to uncover. As Rika reached the front door and stepped outside, she was greeted by the crisp night air. The stars above were scattered across the sky, and the wind rustled through the trees surrounding the mansion. For a brief moment, she felt a sense of calm wash over her, a reminder that the world outside still existed, unaffected by the supernatural horrors she had faced. She got into her car, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the steering wheel. The engine roared to life, and she pulled away from the mansion, leaving it behind in the rearview mirror. But as she drove, the thoughts of Elena and the doll lingered in her mind, refusing to let go. Days passed, and though Rika tried to return to her normal life, the events at the mansion haunted her. Every night, she would wake up in a cold sweat, hearing whispers in her dreams. Sometimes it was Elena's voice, calling out to her, and other times it was the sinister voice of the doll, taunting her with cryptic messages. Her sleep became restless, and her waking hours were filled with paranoia. She would catch herself glancing over her shoulder, feeling as though she was being watched. Every creak of the floor or distant sound made her jump. She tried to convince herself that it was all over, that destroying the mirror had ended the nightmare, but something deep inside told her that wasn't true. One evening, as she sat in her apartment, the quiet hum of the television doing little to distract her from her thoughts, her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. Rika frowned as she opened it, her heart skipping a beat as she read the text. "I'm still here. You can't escape." Her blood ran cold. The words on the screen sent a chill down her spine. Could it be? No, it was impossible. Elena had said that destroying the mirror would stop the doll. But if that was true, why was she still receiving messages like this? Without thinking, Rika tried calling the number, but it went straight to voicemail. Panic surged through her. She checked the message again, hoping it was some kind of prank, but the sense of dread building in her chest told her otherwise. She sat on her couch, her phone clutched tightly in her hands. For the first time in days, she felt completely lost. She had no idea what to do or who to turn to. The supernatural forces at play were beyond anything she had ever imagined. As she sat there, trying to make sense of the situation, her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message, it was a picture. Her breath caught in her throat as she opened it. The image showed her apartment building, the view from just outside her front door. The timestamp on the photo showed it had been taken only minutes ago. Rika jumped to her feet, her heart pounding. She ran to her front door and flung it open, looking down the hallway. But there was no one there. The hallway was empty, and the only sound was the faint hum of the lights overhead. Her hands trembled as she locked the door behind her. She needed to call the police. Someone or something was messing with her. But what would she tell them? That a cursed doll was haunting her? That she had been pulled into another world by a girl trapped in a mirror? They would never believe her. Instead, Rika grabbed her keys and headed for the door. She needed to get out of the apartment, clear her head, and figure out her next move. But as soon as she reached the door, her phone buzzed once again. This time, it was another message. "Don't run. You belong to me now." Her hands shook as she read the words. It was the doll. It had to be. The sinister force that had controlled the doll wasn't gone. It was still out there, and it was coming for her. Without thinking, Rika rushed to the elevator and pressed the button for the ground floor. She needed to get as far away as possible. But as the doors closed and the elevator began to descend, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was another picture, this one showing the inside of the elevator she was in. She felt her stomach drop. She was being watched. But how? She frantically looked around, but the small space was empty, save for her own reflection in the mirrors lining the walls. When the elevator doors finally opened, Rika bolted out into the lobby, her eyes darting around for any sign of the mysterious presence. But again, the space was empty. No one was there. Her phone buzzed once more, and this time, the message was simple. I see you. Her heart pounded as she ran out of the building and into the night. The city streets were quiet, and the chill of the evening air bit at her skin. She didn't know where to go, but she knew she couldn't stay in her apartment. Desperate for answers, she decided to return to the antique shop. The shopkeeper had warned her about the doll's dark history. Perhaps he knew more than he had let on. Perhaps there was a way to stop this for good. When Rika arrived at the shop, the streets were deserted and the shop's lights were dim. She hesitated for a moment before pushing open the door. The familiar musty scent of old furniture and antiques filled her senses as she stepped inside. The shopkeeper was behind the counter, his expression grim when he saw her enter. He said nothing as she approached, but his eyes held a look of understanding, as though he knew why she had come back. I thought it was over, Rika said, her voice trembling. I destroyed the mirror, but it's still following me. The shopkeeper's face grew even more somber. He sighed heavily before speaking. I had hoped that destroying the mirror would be enough, but it seems the curse is stronger than I realized. Rika's heart sank. What do I do? How do I stop it? The shopkeeper didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached beneath the counter and pulled out an old leather-bound book. He placed it gently on the counter and began flipping through the pages.